Core Keeper is a mining sandbox adventure game for 1 to 8 players. It's released by developers Pugstorm, and in the game you focus on mining, building, fighting, and even crafting and farming to some extent to unravel the mysteries of the ancient core. Okay, I just read that description, but it is pretty much what that is. The game reminds me of a combination of Terraria and Stardew Valley and other games like Starbound. It's definitely focusing more on the dungeon crawling and the mining aspects of the game because, well, you're stuck underground and you need to find resources, build better armor, build better equipment in order to progress the game. In this co-op game review, I take a look at some of the game mechanics, but also the co-op game mechanics as well, so you have a better understanding if you want to buy this game and play it with your friends. So let's get straight into the review. So for the game setup, as well as connectivity setup for co-op, it was pretty straightforward. You do have some issues that were happening with other people, so I read a lot of reviews online with connectivity issues, but the developers were really on top of this. They've already released patches, they've already released a beta in order to help with this situation. So that's a big tick for me, especially a developer who's willing to do that. But for us, it was really simple. For us, the host simply just gave us a token, and then we would just join the game. They would just post a token, into Discord or whatever messaging device you're using, and we'll just copy and paste it into the join game, and voila, you joined their game, and you basically go into their world. Now, if you want to go and keep all your items and run your own solo kind of run, well, you can, because you pretty much carry on your progress. So for anything like, for example, you picked up a piece of armor that was really cool, then you can just bring it back to your own world and you can play your own game. So honestly, on that level, the game setup and such like that, it is pretty well done. I personally feel like there's not many issues I would really talk about. Yes, you might run into some connectivity issues like people have online but however, my best advice is just keep the same patch. Most games I know or run with co-op, if you have different patches, different DLCs, that's where the problems really arise. And honestly, the best simple way to approach this is just to keep everyone on the same patch. If you need a patch, then get everyone a patch. But in my opinion, this game setup and connectivity is well done. Okay, so what about the gameplay? What about how does a co-op work, for example? Well, I'll take a quick look at how this works and to give a bit of insight without spoiling too much. Firstly, the game-wise, you spawn in a world where basically there's a core in front of you, there's a few monuments, and you're kind of like, okay, what's going on? But basically you realize these are powered down and you have to power them up. Obviously, then you realize, there are a lot of bosses around and you need to basically find these bosses and basically defeat them in order to progress the game. That's on a simple level. Obviously, because it is a sandbox, there's so much other stuff to do, especially working together, creating cool tech, creating buildings, creating farms, fishing. There's so much stuff you can do, but it is overall pretty solo, if that makes sense. Like most games out there, especially co-op, you're kind of solo and then you're playing in someone's world, right? There's a few co-op elements, but for the majority part, you're kind of just a solo player in another person's world, and I think for these type of games, it's completely fine. For example, games like Minecraft don't really have that much depth in their co-op element. It's just a fact you're having fun and you can actually play with others that makes these type of games more fun, especially in a sandbox setting. In my opinion, sandboxes pretty much are a reason why co-op is fun, because you get to build stuff together. A lot of times you can basically delegate tasks. For example, people were collecting resources, people were hunting, people were doing farming in our game. So honestly, that's where the co-op elements come from, in my opinion. You don't really need to build more on top of that. I think the most important part is obviously connectivity. I think for co-op games in a sandbox setting, you need to have good connectivity. The multiplayer needs to be very clean, and you don't want to have any network problems. And I think that's what Core Keeper does really well, keeps it simple, so you don't have any of those issues, so you can really explore the world without needing to, tether or something. Beyond the co-op elements or the co-op kind of talk, the gameplay itself is great. You have a lot of things to do. There's so many activities you can do, kind of like Stardew Valley obviously, but in my opinion it's kind of like Stardew Valley, but you're really focusing more on dungeon elements rather than farming elements, even though farming does exist in this game. Now, in my opinion, this game really focuses on getting you to find better resources, finding better equipment, finding little secrets and stuff that get better equipment for you, better swords, better armor. And honestly, this is how the game progresses, and it's a really fun dungeon crawler, honestly. I think it really deserves a lot more praise. But in the next kind of segment, I'll be talking about, is it worth buying it as an early access? Now, I have a lot of issues with general early access games. I think these days early access is just a very, very poor excuse to release a game and then blame it on early access if it doesn't have any things to do or many things to do. But in my opinion, the best way to check if a game is worthwhile to buy is I simply just go to game reviews and I take a look at, for example, is it very positive, is it mixed, and then I look at how many hours people have played the game. And Core Keeper has a decent amount of hours. I think the average range is probably 10 to 20, which is very good for an early access game, especially at its current price. Now, in my opinion, it is very worth to buy this game in early access. There's so much content to do, especially for the price you're paying for, and in my opinion, you're gonna get your bang for the buck, especially as they release new content. I think the developers are really on top of exactly what they want to, I guess, develop next and release next into their game, and they're pretty set on finishing this game by the end of the year, whilst a lot of games out there have been, quotation mark, early access for many years and have no kind of real roadmap to actually finishing. So I think, to be honest, this game is really well worth its buck. If you really want to, save money, then sure, wait and see if they're going to release new content. But I think this game is doing really well, and I mean, the amount of copies they've sold pretty much speaks volume of what I think here, right? So in my opinion, definitely get the game. I think you're definitely going to get your money's worth if you're worried about the early access. And that's it. That's my game review. Hopefully I try to keep it as short as possible. I really hate looking and watching long reviews myself, so I try to keep this one as short as possible. If you like this content, I do a lot of other co-op game reviews, so don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.